Ladies and gentlemen, you welcome to this edition of the Primetime Newscast on Équinoxe Television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. We're sorry for the late start. In our top stories in this edition of the news, His Royal Majesty Sokuju Chenjo II questions the unity of Cameroon, a country plagued by a plethora of socio-political, economic, and above all, security challenges in two Anglophone regions of the country. The paramount ruler of Bamenju in the west region of Cameroon thinks that at a time when the country's unity is seriously threatened, it is high time to look back, to review Cameroon's living together, correct the wrongs, and put an end to the continuous killings, destruction of properties, and displacement of hundreds of thousands of citizens. And the President of the Republic, Paul Biya, urges all Cameroonians to unite against a common enemy, the coronavirus pandemic. But some civil society leaders have said a message largely focused on the coronavirus pandemic on the eve of National Unity Day celebration was inappropriate. Some opposition politicians are calling on Cameroonians to rise up, take the bull by the horn, and fight for a better Cameroon because, according to them, the current regime has failed. Honorable Cabral Libi and Professor Maurice Kamto also addressed the nation yesterday. Details are coming up next. The President of the Republic of Cameroon, Paul Biya, has urged all Cameroonians and all persons living on the Cameroonian territory to be more responsible and disciplined in order to help in the fight to stop the spread of coronavirus in the country. And he has called on all Cameroonians to unite against the common enemy. He was speaking to the nation yesterday in a message largely focused on the coronavirus pandemic and the May 20 celebration of the National Unity Day to a lesser extent. And concerning the National Unity Day, he simply talked about the fact that public manifestations were out of place as far as this edition of the National Unity Day is concerned because of the coronavirus pandemic. And so the National Unity Day took place today without any public celebration, the 48th edition, different from previous editions because of the coronavirus pandemic. And in the report coming up next, Innocent takes us back into the message of President Paul Biya to the nation yesterday.
The President of the Republic of Cameroon appears for the first time in public to address the COVID-19 pandemic situation.
I usually do not address you on the eve of our National Day.
In his address to the nation, he admitted the fact that the health crisis has adversely affected the country's economy.
We will have to return subsequently to the path of growth, while ensuring that jobs are preserved as much as possible during this period of uncertainty and difficulty. I urge the government to continue to mobilize as it has been doing since the outbreak of this health crisis. In an unprecedented social context, it should in particular be resourceful and inventive education sector and regulate economic activity so as to safeguard social stability and peace.
And that, health-wise, the pandemic remains controllable.
We will therefore spare no effort to check the spread of the virus and reduce the mortality rate resulting from the pandemic. COVID-19 will undoubtedly mark a turning point in the functioning of our society. It requires that we continue to strengthen our health facilities, scale up our health care services, and above all, update some of our development projects and programs. In the face of this ordeal, our health system must be more efficient. The other diseases affecting Cameroonians just as much must not be neglected. The same should apply to the routine immunization program. That is why specialized COVID-19 treatment centers have been set up in Yaoundé and Douala. Others are being established in regional and divisional quarters.
The man many have been awaiting to address the health crisis, while thanking all who have contributed in the fight against COVID-19, urges Cameroonians to believe in his government, assuring determination to conquer the coronavirus with continuous assistance of each and every compatriot.
These relief measures do not exempt us from complying with barrier gestures, particularly the wearing of face masks in public places, as well as the ban on public gatherings, aimed at checking the spread of the pandemic. I therefore call on Cameroonians to have trust in public authorities. The government is fully aware of the gravity of the situation and is prepared to take all necessary measures. I know I can once again count on your patriotic spirit, your sense of responsibility, and your courage to enable us to collectively overcome this scourge that is affecting the entire planet.
President Paul Biya did not end his COVID-19 speech without showing concern to families of victims of this COVID-19 and those tested positive, while exhorting all to shun stigmatization of patients.
I would now avail myself of this opportunity to extend my sympathy to the families that have lost loved ones to this terrible disease. I extend my heartfelt encouragement to patients admitted to our hospitals and with them a speedy recovery. I also call on those who have tested positive to strictly adhere to the rules of confinement. We should bear in mind that negligence by a single individual can seriously harm the entire community. We should therefore not be complacent. I also wish to hail the courage of Cameroonian health professionals and those assisting them.
The President of the Republic was open-minded, clearly stating, health of compatriots, this tough moment is his preoccupation.
That the government, at my behest, is doing its utmost to bail us out of this serious health crisis.
And civil society leaders have expressed convergent and divergent views on yesterday's message of the President of the Republic, Paul Biya, to the nation, a message largely focused on the coronavirus pandemic on the eve of a historic day. And while Dr. Nick Ngwanyam, educationist, supports the focus of President Paul Biya, Gilbert Ngimdo, historian and civil society leader, says that the President's message was untimely and inappropriate. He thinks that message should have come earlier and not on the eve of National Unity Day. Equinoxe once more.
He had banned the public celebration of the National Unity Day, and on the eve of this special day in the history of Cameroon, this is all he said.
Fellow Cameroonians, my dear compatriots, I usually do not address you on the eve of our National Day. Traditionally, this is an occasion to celebrate with joy our national unity as well as our republican and democratic values.
18 of the 19 minutes he used focused on the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Gimdo Gilbert says this was inappropriate.
Then he should have chosen a different day than the eve of National Day, when he wouldn't say anything concerning national unity. I want to believe that he is already conscious of the frailty of national unity. He's aware that the country is fragmenting, the country is breaking down, and that unity is completely at risk as we talk now.
According to Dr. Nick Ngwanyam, the president's choice to ignore national unity and address the COVID-19 pandemic solely should be applauded.
The main purpose of coming out was not to come and talk about that, because it is not that day of the 20th May that is terrorizing Cameroon now. It is the COVID-19. There are moments when we have to leave celebrations alone and face a common enemy that can wipe us out. And even when you have three problems, you can pinpoint one that carries the weight of the day and decide to deal with that. He was speaking just for 18 minutes, and in 18 minutes time, he was able to actually handle the COVID-19 topic and go into detail in it. If he started to talk about the Anglophone problem, the economic problems, the youth problems, the 20th May itself, which to me is not really very relevant, and then the COVID-19, then he would have just mentioned it in passing.
Gimdo Gilbert, however, does not see the speech useless, but regrets it was not timely.
He came up with the speech when Cameroonians were already very exasperated, disgusted about his attitude towards a pandemic that is putting the nation at risk. He had not considered it very important to address the nation, to speak himself like his other colleagues are doing in Africa and the rest of the world.
It is better to be late than never, according to Dr. Nick.
The bottom line is that he is doing well. The bottom line is that he is in charge. Before he even spoke, rumors were all everywhere that he had passed on. And when he showed up yesterday, I understand some people were more bent on trying to see whether he was the one talking than concentrating on what he was telling us.
To Gilbert still, the speech was time killer due to repetition of what other members of government had earlier said.
On the issue of wearing mask, distancing, and he didn't say any other thing so different. He did not make that difference as the President of the Republic. Normally when the government is enforcing measures and the President of the Republic distinguishes himself to come and talk to Cameroonians, Cameroonians want concrete actions. Cameroonians do not want politicking around something that does not in any way want politics.
A view not shared by Dr. Nick.
It's a good thing that he comes on board, because many people have observed that with the fight of the COVID-19, his ministers were kind of like fighting other people, and there was a lot of noise in the air, a lot of noise in the country, with people going in dispersed ranks, and with people talking more about politics and trying to make political gain out of the COVID-19 than actually fighting the COVID-19.
Whatever be the case, President Paul Biya in same speech said health of his citizens is of prime importance. Thus, needs to galvanize attention as well as resources to conquer the coronavirus pandemic. He had banned public celebrations.
Barrister Agbo Bala, president and founder of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa, says that this should not be a day of celebration. May 20 should rather be a day of reflection and a day when people come together to reason on how to solve the problems affecting the nation, especially the security challenges, the armed conflicts in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, threatening the country's unity for over 4 years today. He was speaking to Derek Jato in the town of Boya, which was more or less a dead town today because of the absence of festivities marking the National Day celebration, as it is the case across the National Triangle. And also speaking to Derek Jato, Barrister Kamini indicated that this should be a day to look back and see what went wrong, what should be corrected for a better future. Derek Jato.
It is Wednesday, the 20th day of May 2020, a national day in Cameroon, And over here in Buea, the southwest regional capital, the ceremonial grandstand, which has been hosting the ceremony for decades, is quiet and empty. Coronavirus is dictating the pace of things here.
Buea today has been a very quiet city. It depicts the moment. It's a moment of introspection. It's a moment of looking at each other as your brother's keeper. It's a moment of reflecting on the very quintessence of life.
I look at Buea today. I urge the people, make a reflection of the essence of this day and how we can live in a more united way, with respect for each other, for us to rise above the pettiness, the tribalism, the regionalism.
In their private corners, what is making news is President Paul Biya's address to the nation on the eve of the National Day. Kumfor Barrister John Kamani revealed to Equinoxe Television what he gathered from the head of state speech.
And the particular measures being taken by the head of state, as enunciated again once more in his address, his unusual address to the nation on the 19th, was straight to the point. All other issues plaguing the countries have received very serious attention. That's why I believe, politics aside, certain skirmishes in and out of the regions aside, the main thing that affects the rich, the poor, the entire nation as we speak, is the COVID-19 pandemic. I think the president had to put square pegs into square holes, and by reiterating that we cannot make festive in the middle of this pandemic was just the right thing to do.
Barrister Agbo Felix Bala gave President Biya a tick on his speech on COVID-19.
By and large, I was impressed with his speech with regards to COVID-19, and I think that is better for the head of state to address the nation more often when they are very pertinent issues, so that at least people can feel the presence of the president.
But said he was expecting President Paul Biya to sympathize with family members whose loved ones were massacred in Garbo by his forces.
The Garbo massacre, for example, also was something that I expected him to just say a word about it, and in as much as he condoled with those who've lost loved ones and families during the COVID-19, I expected him to say same for those also in the southwest and the northwest regions, and especially those of recent in Garbo.
On the National Day celebration as One People, One Nation, this former United Nations legal advisor and president of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa raised but many questions.
Why?
Barrister Agbo Bala speaking there. Derejato, thanks for that report. And some opposition politicians have called on Cameroonians to rise up and take up the bull by the horn and fight for a better Cameroon tomorrow, because according to them, the present regime has failed. Honorable Cabral Libi, national president of the Cameroon Party for National Reconciliation and the national president of the CRM political party, Professor Maurice Kamto, equally addressed the nation yesterday. For me, Armstrong Sander has more.
Professor Maurice Kamto began his 48th National Day message by regretting what he qualifies as the barbarism of the government on the people of the Northwest and Southwest regions.
The current government continues to impose on the brave populations of the Northwest and Southwest this violent, barbaric, and useless civil war, which they single-handedly started following the protest movements of November 2016. And whose tragic consequences are deplorable in many respects. Evidence of the damage is overwhelming. The multiplication of massacres of innocent civilian populations, one of the most recent and emblematic of which was perpetrated in Garbo on 14th February by the army, the collection of civilian and military victims of this war, the tragedy of thousands of our fellow refugees in Nigeria and the plight of hundreds of thousands of internally displaced people. The burning of homes, the destruction of infrastructure, and socio-economic disaster generated by this war. And all this happens under the indifferent watch of an arrogant and contemptuous power. I would like to take this opportunity to once again honor the memory of the victims of this atrocious war and to reiterate my sincere condolences to their families, as well as my best wishes for speedy recovery to the injured. It is high time that lasting solutions were brought to this unsustainable situation.
A bleak atmosphere, which according to the Cameroon Renaissance Movement's political party national president, does not favor national unity.
Is it possible to mention national unity in a context like the one I have just recalled?
Je pense que le pire est à venir. Si rien n'est fait, plus rien ne restera du Cameroun d'ici quelques années.
Cabral Libi, national chairman of the Cameroon Party for National Reconciliation, in his message on the same issue, said the worse than the Anglophone crisis will befall Cameroon if nothing is done. He says the current government has proven its incompetence in every domain, and Cameroonians must put an end to the political manipulation which has taken a tribal and ethnic direction, with the risks of getting Cameroon into disaster.
Un affrontement interethnique déguisé.
Maurice Kamto says the National Day must be understood as a moment for questioning our individual or collective effort on the meaning that we give to our status as citizens or our national ambitions.
The paramount ruler of the Bamenju people in the west region of the Republic of Cameroon, His Royal Majesty Jean Rameau Sokoju Chenju II, says on this May 20 day, it is important to review the countries living together instead of continuing in deception that all is well, promoted by the usual Unity Day parade, whereas the bone or the house is on fire. He adds that general interest should overshadow partisan and tribalistic interests. His Royal Majesty Sokoju Chenju II of Bamenju goes further to question the country's unity highlighting socio-economic and security challenges affecting people in Anglophone Cameroon, the insecurity or the insensitive attitude of government authorities. His Royal Majesty Sokoju Chenju II of Bamenju says that it is time to stop deceiving people that all is well, because there is fire on the mountain, so to speak, with the crisis in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, killing many, destructing properties, and of course displacing hundreds of thousands of people who are now internally displaced persons seeking refuge in other parts of the country, and some who are now refugees in neighboring Nigeria. Talking Point is up next. Our guest today, Professor Paul Kui, is a member of the Constitutional Council. Professor, thanks for joining us in this edition of the news.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we're going to take a review of the country or the state of the unity of Cameroon. But before that, your reaction to President Paul Biya's address to the nation yesterday.
I think the president's speech, to me, reinforces previous actions taken by the government of Cameroon through the mouthpiece of head of government, the Prime Minister. Because yesterday he reasserted our collective endeavor to combat the COVID-19. It's no more, we shouldn't politicize it. Sometimes we forget of COVID-16. COVID-16. Right now in Cameroon, we are faced with two. What is happening in the Northwest, which has killed thousands, and then COVID-19, which comes in to increase the burden on government and on managers of civil society to be able to protect local populations. Because the role of government is to serve the common good. And the speech of the president was to reassert that in the face of the COVID-19, we need to be one in order to fight this pandemic.
Professor, what do you think about the idea that a speech largely focused on the coronavirus pandemic, which is of course one of the major problems affecting Cameroon, Africa, and the world today, on the eve of National Unity Day, and at a time when the unity of the country is seriously threatened, notably by the Anglophone crisis, was inappropriate? In other words, it was inappropriate for the head of state to focus largely on the pandemic on the eve of National Unity Day celebration. What do you think about that?
I think the pandemic is having untold effect on our way of behavior, on the way government behaves, on the way managers of civil societies are behaving, because our social and economic life is being oriented. It's been disrupted in a sense. To emphasize national unity is something good, but to celebrate the 48 years of independence, of our national unity, requires a deeper reflection, because all of us decided to create this one Cameroon. But if you go back to 61 and you walk your way all the way to 72, you begin to ask questions whether the founding fathers of modern Cameroon were sincere in their effort to search, in their efforts to build a solid country built on our cultural diversity, not just ethnic diversity, but our international cultural uniqueness. And I think that the creation of the Bilingual Commission was an open admission that this was one of the unique components which was initially, even in the 72, built into the way Cameroon ought to have evolved.
Professor
and
Paul,
I think probably because of the devastating nature of the coronavirus, the president seemed to have placed emphasis on our collective effort to fight this disease this virus, and to ensure that we return to normalcy.
Professor Paul, let's now take a look at the state of the unity of Cameroon. First of all, where were you on the 20th of May, 1972, this historic day in the history or in the life of the nation, Cameroon, when we moved from the federal state into a unitary state? Where were you and how did this happen?
To be honest with you, in 72, I was a PhD student at the university, and even my PhD was focus on the contribution of traditional rulers in modern politics. And 1972 for me was another stage in a dialogue which started in Fumban and worked its way through a federal constitution, having created what you call the Federal Republic of Cameroon. And then in 1972, we had what you call the United Republic of Cameroon. And the word united implied that a unity implies that there are composite parts that make up that unity. And any attempt to ignore those parts and its functional nature simply crushes the spirit of the founding fathers. And I'm sure that they themselves would have a different vision, a different assessment of what has happened over these 48 years of us being a united Cameroon.
Some civil society and political leaders attribute the crisis in the northwest and southwest regions of the country today to what happened on the 20th of May 1972, the abolition
that we can assess what went wrong along this road to what you now call the Republic of Cameroon. Because all along, we had a federal republic. We took off the word federal. And that federal means there were two states independently functioning with its own government and parliament. Then to the United Republic of Cameroon with a parliament that brought in all the two major states, the East and Southern Cameroon. That means in 72, that's the day we celebrate as our national day. Even the day that we got our independence is given very little celebration. January 1st of 1960s, East Cameroon became independent. Sometimes nobody makes any reference to that. October 1961 was the independence of Southern Cameroon. And virtually all the way up to 1972, the founding fathers sought ways and means of building a united Cameroon. Because if you go back to the Anglophone, the political parties at the time focused on our unity by calling those parties using the German name for Cameroon with K. So the KNDP, the KNC, etc., were emphasizing that we were once part of the German colony and we wanted to come together.
All right, Professor, it's rather unfortunate that we are caught up by time. In some few seconds, before we go, 48 years down memory lane, what's your take on the state of that unity today?
I think it needs total overhauling, and the President of the Republic in his speech from Paris acknowledged that there was need to reflect on the future, because he simply said all along, all these 47 years or 48 years, we have failed to achieve a harmonious unity. Crafting slogans doesn't make us unified. It is restructuring the fundamental units that bind us together as a united people called Cameroonian.
Professor Paul Kui, member of the Constitutional Council of Cameroon, thanks so much for joining us today in this edition of the news on Equinoxe Television. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. Goodbye.